Welcome everybody to Alpha Bets. I'm your host Nathan Warden. With me today is Ross Klein, the CIO of ChangeBridge Capital, and Pat Connolly, our resident stock detective. Alpha Bets is a recurring conversation where we look into consumer-facing companies and we seek to discover the key drivers of the business's success and sometimes failure. Today we're looking at Nibe. Pat, can you tell us what Nibe is?
Nibe is a climate-focused company. It's a holding company, but they also do their own operations. It's been growing like crazy. I discovered it through a geothermal installation company I follow on Instagram. And I zoomed in, saw what product was being installed, and found the holding company that owned it. So I'm looking into it more. Yeah.
Sounds good. And give us the bird's eye view.
It's been growing. It's been growing really pretty fast. Their EBITDA margin's been improving, like healthy, and so it seems like they're getting some good operating leverage. They have these pretty lofty aspirations for the company. They want to grow 20% a year. They want to do acquisitions, and they want to really be pretty shareholder friendly. It looks like.
Gotcha.
We don't know if they can do it or not, but it's been going well so far.
Ross, had you ever heard of Nibe before, and what was your first impression of the company?
I hadn't prior to this. I was really intrigued by the end market, by the environmental friendliness of what they're trying to do. So off the bat, I was excited to learn more about it. A few things that stood out that I thought would be really important for us to understand are a geographic breakdown, since it is an international business and they do break out their geographic and business segments. Also figure out what incremental margins look like so we can get an idea of what a more mature operating margin profile would be. And then an understanding of subsidies and how much of that business is reliant on government support, and what the timeline is for that support to continue.
Perfect. So Nibe breaks out their segments, like you said. Pat, what should we be looking at for these segments?
Yeah, you can see that climate solutions is really driving the company. And even if you go back a couple of years or even 10 years, it's always been like their number one focus. And it's just been kind of growing to a more significant part as time has gone on. It's a pretty global company. Like they're everywhere. And yeah, you're going to see that climate solutions is the most exciting part of the company. That's how I found it. And that's what interests me the most.
So Ross, when you say looking at things broken down by segment, what questions do you have about this slide?
I'd like to see it historically. So how are the Nordic countries doing over time? How's Europe doing over time? How's um, stoves doing over time as a business segment? That'll give us a little bit more perspective in terms of what we think it looks like in the future.
Yeah, and on this next slide, the segments isn't necessarily broken down by region, but does look like by the different segments. So, Pat, over time, what should we be looking at here in the segments broken out over these different years?
So Element's been pretty consistent. It's mostly like internal components to various, like they like to keep things warm. That's their thing, heat. So like they'll keep a wind turbine heated, or like an electric vehicle charger heated, like internal components to that. And then stove was actually kind of a COVID beneficiary where people were at home and they wanted to install new wood pellet stoves. And there have been some subsidies where even in the United States in 2020 that there are carbon tax credits where you can replace your stove and get credits for that. And climate solutions is mostly heat pumps, water boilers, stuff like that. Really just energy efficient across the board. And there are a little bit of synergies between Element and climate solutions and still discounts on that.
Perfect. All right, and so the main business is the heat pumps, right? Go ahead and talk to us about the heat pump business of Nibe.
It's at least like the most exciting part to me. So if you go on these climate zero carbon emission group pages, they say two things. They say we need electrified vehicles and we need heat pumps inside all homes. So you look at the heat pump market, it seems really underpenetrated. Like only 5% of the world's heat right now is done through heat pumps. And the Nordic countries in Europe, right, they're kind of leaders in this space. and that's where this company's based out of. So we can see the estimates in the top right where some people want 50% of all heat to be through heat pumps, and that'd be a 10x installation base. So it is an interesting topic, at least.
Ross, from what you're aware of, is heat pumps actually the future? Are we looking at heat pumps for our future heating needs? Does this seem like an interesting thesis?
I don't know if anyone knows exactly what the renewable source of energy will be of the future. The most likely scenario to me and to us is probably that it's a combination of different things. Wind might play a role, solar might play a role, geothermal might play a role, nuclear is becoming very popular again. So yeah, it seems very possible that this could play a meaningful role, given that it is clean and given that it generates on itself, right? So there's an incremental upfront cost. You have to overcome that. But once you do, the break even happens, and it's more easily maintained than a lot of the other options out there today.
Perfect. And so subsidies, that was one thing that we wanted to. And so subsidies, that's one thing that we wanted to make sure that we talked about. Pat, give us a breakdown on the subsidies.
It looks like it's driving 15 to 17% of their sales. That's what they said in the last earnings call. So it's definitely notable. I would say subsidies are probably the way governments are trying to get the manufacturers up to scale, to get the adoption going, because they all have these zero carbon dates, but they're putting hard dates in the line where they want to phase out oil burners, phase out gas burners, and we see it in new construction where a lot of these heat pumps are installed in new construction. And one notable thing is we are subsidizing fossil fuels a lot to this day. So that seems like a big target for politicians to be, hey, we're subsidizing these oil companies. Why don't we start subsidizing these climate efficient companies?
So Ross, why are subsidies so important for Nibe?
Well, it makes the prospect for a consumer that much more interesting, right? So if I'm going to pay $10,000, I'm making up numbers here, but if I'm going to pay $10,000 up front for something and it takes me 8 years to make it back, I'm not that excited about it as a consumer. It's hard to look out 8 years and feel good about that. If I can get it subsidized and pay $5,000 and feel like I'm getting a deal and my break even now is 4 years, it's much more exciting. And so, for the government powers that be able to incent a customer to make this purchase is really powerful, but in both directions, right? It's powerful right now because it drives revenue. But if those subsidies were to go away, it becomes powerful in the opposite direction because the company has difficult comps to go up against. And customers generally know, right, that a subsidy is going to end, and they'll pull forward demand in advance of that. And so it's really important to understand the timeline of these subsidies.
And would you, just looking at this, would you assume that the subsidies are, as much as they'll be, or do you think that the subsidies could grow? Sounds like you're more scared that they will retract. Am I hearing that right?
At this valuation level, at a company that's trading at more than 8 times sales for, mid-teens operating margins, I'm more concerned about the risk than I am excited about the upside. And so, when we start an analysis of any company, we want to figure out what can go wrong first, right? Check those things off. And then if we can get through those what can go wrong items, we have the confidence to move forward as an investor. And so it's just always in my nature to try to say, well, where can we be wrong on this thesis before we figure out where can we be right on this thesis?
And subsidies are a pretty big place where we could be wrong on the thesis because you just don't know what governments are going to do.
You don't know. I think the tides are shifting in favor of a greener and cleaner economy, and that's great. But you just never know, how a political administration could change and how that might impact some of the subsidies. France, it looks like, was a 1-year term. Italy expires in 23. The U.S. in January of 24. Those are years that are getting closer. That's not to say they can't be extended or even expanded upon, but if you're looking after 2024 and 15% of your demand is coming from subsidies and those go away, the numbers get a lot harder quickly.
Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts on subsidies, Pat or Ross?
No, I think it's exciting as an investor to see the subsidies, but yeah, Ross is right. You don't want to just rely on that. You can't do that.
Totally. All right, so Pat, give me the Porter's 5 forces on Nibe and heat pumps.
Well, yeah, just digging around, it seemed like all these existing HVAC companies, they're starting to get into heat pumps. And heat pumps aren't even really a new thing. Like your typical air conditioner is technically a heat pump. They've been around for decades. But the use case of using it for heating your home is pretty novel and it's getting more and more common. So yeah, I was excited by government saying, "Oh, we got to decarbonize, and we're gonna do that." And all these companies are kind of jumping on board, and they're investing more and more into heat pumps, especially in the United States, where it's really like inning one, inning two, in my opinion.
Ross, any thoughts on suppliers, competition, new entrants when it comes to Nibe and heat pumps?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a nascent market that I don't worry as much about new entrants. But it's always important to watch and see if Johnson Controls says, "Hey, we're going to undercut Nibe by 20%." It becomes a lot harder as a consumer to go in that direction, right? So it's very important to keep an eye on that.
So trading dynamics, Pat, what would you like to make a point of here for trading dynamics in Nibe?
Yeah, I didn't know. So like the stock was up a ton, and I was looking at like it seemed like it was like a really low float. Is that a contributing factor? Or it seems like only 20% of the shares are available for me and you to trade. Is that weird or is that normal?
Yeah, what do you think,
No,
Ross?
it's an ADR. It's not a U.S. listing. It's held by one or two shareholders largely. That happens. That's not the norm for publicly traded companies, but that does happen, and it's not highly liquid.
That seems like a pretty big risk to me. So it looks like 46% of the stock, current and former board members, and then the Swedish billionaires, another 20%. ADR, would you call this a huge risk or not necessarily?
Opportunity, right? You want to see insiders owning it. Generally, it's not always great for governance when it's majority held by a few holders and they control the company. But from an alignment of incentives perspective, you want to see your management team and insiders and board alongside your shareholders, right? You want their motivations to be similar to our motivations. So it doesn't bother me. Now, if you manage a portfolio that's large and liquidity is relevant, then this is a big problem for you.
So maybe it's almost easier for a retail investor to get into the stock. For someone managing a big portfolio, managing funds, and liquidity is an issue, that's a bit harder of a hurdle.
The big consideration, yeah.
And then the one other thing I wanted to ask about this was if they haven't issued any shares for the last 5 years and this valuation is so high, does that actually make you even more confident that the insiders are holding in such a large amount? They're cool with it being this high. They're not selling even though the valuation is so high.
It's always a good sign that the insiders aren't selling. It's hard to argue with that.
Yep. Cool. All right, Pat, what should we watch moving forward with Nibe?
Yeah, so I assume this is an ESG play for a lot of people trying to create ESG funds. So they'll get some eyeballs there, which will probably be a nice boost to the equity. I don't know if this will be something that can get uplisted to the New York Stock Exchange, which would increase the liquidity, increase how attractive it is. We gotta watch the subsidies, like Ross said. They could be leaving any day or increasing. Who knows? Seems like it tracks housing starts pretty decently. So if housing gets going, this could track it. And then yes, it's a TAM versus serviceable addressable market question too, where maybe everyone could have heat pumps in the Northeast United States, but will everyone? Probably not. So yeah, big TAM, but who knows how much of it they can capture.
What is a TAM versus SAM? What does SAM even mean? Sorry, I'm just curious.
Serviceable addressable market.
Serviceable, meaning like the total addressable market isn't necessarily everyone who's serviceable.
Like everyone needs heat in their homes, but not everyone will need a geothermal heat pump, or not everyone will use a geothermal heat pump.
Gotcha. Cool. Ross, of these things to watch moving forward, which ones are the most interesting to you?
I love the connection to housing starts. It gives us an economic data point that we can use as a predictive indicator. And as an active investor, that's always a nice thing to have. So I think Pat makes a great point in spending some time looking at housing starts and the correlation to that. And then obviously subsidies for me is incredibly important.
All right, final thoughts, sound blurbs. I want to hear the one or two most important things that you think sum up this conversation and your feelings about the stock. Pat, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So like, I see the run up. I see like the not that liquid. And I see the tailwinds. I get excited, but then I hear the pushback about the subsidies. So I just looking at it, I'm like, hey, if we can get a reliable measure of subsidies and track that well, maybe this is a buy if you can get a grip on the subsidies.
Mm-hmm.
That's my thought.
Ross, main thoughts?
Yeah, similar to Pat, I'm concerned about the subsidy structure in that at least 15% of the revenue is coming from business that they're not generating themselves. Increased competition is a real risk. And it's trading at a valuation that prices in a lot of success.
Good thoughts. All right, so I can't ask Ross this, but Pat, I can say, are you buying?
Not yet, and I think I would have to like convert my currency to buy it. Like I don't think I would buy the ADR. I think I would buy it on the Swedish exchange. I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
I'll approach it.
One last thing actually I did want to ask was your point about, could it get uplisted to the NASDAQ? Ross, is that even likely? Like how often would you think that would be part of the investment case? Do you think that that's something to even be considering?
Unless the company's talking about it, I wouldn't speculate on it. And I didn't see them spend any meaningful time recently talking about it. But it is always a potential.
Yeah, cool. All right, thanks so much for your thoughts. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. If you have any questions, definitely leave them in the comments, and we will continue to track this company. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.